In the peaceful village of Haven, the sudden appearance of a huge iceberg off the coast quickly became the talk of the day. This rare sight caught everyone's attention and drew people to the shoreline to see it up close. Residents, accustomed to seeing smaller pieces of ice floating from the far north, gathered excitedly to see this massive iceberg up close. But as daylight illuminated more details, a sense of shock spread among the crowd. What was that? The villagers could not believe their eyes when they saw what was on top of the iceberg. "Do you guys see that too?" they asked quietly to each other. The discovery made everyone shudder. The normally talkative villagers now stood speechless and pale, staring at the top of the iceberg. What was going on? But before we start, smash the like button and make sure to subscribe if you haven't, and hit that notification bell so that you won't miss any news stories. "Just another chunk from the north," the inhabitants of the small town said nonchalantly as another chunk of ice floated by. They were used to such scenes and nothing surprised them anymore. They thought they had already seen everything. But this time, it was different. "Have you seen anything like this before?" whispered one villager to the other, both staring in disbelief. "Never in my life," replied the other, equally puzzled. This giant iceberg, unlike the smaller debris that usually melt away during their journey, had somehow arrived intact, arousing excitement and curiosity among the villagers. "It's a wonder it arrived here at all," they agreed, their usual chatter replaced by a shared sense of wonder at the ice giant before them. People scratched their heads, wondering how this giant iceberg could have come near their town. It was either the biggest iceberg anyone had ever seen, or it hadn't melted much on its way here, which was really strange. "It's huge. It must have been a giant to begin with," someone surmised while looking at the huge block of ice glittering under the sundae. "Or maybe it has magic that keeps it from melting," joked another, although everyone knew that was unlikely. While most people were just amazed at the size of the iceberg, there was one who noticed something else. He squeezed his eyes shut and leaned forward as if trying to see a secret the iceberg hid. His curiosity was piqued not only by the size of the iceberg, but also by something unusual that others had not yet seen. Peter had been staring at the iceberg for hours as his high-quality binoculars brought the icy expanse into sharp focus. He couldn't help but marvel at how the sunlight played across the surface, creating a mesmerizing display of blue and white that seemed almost surreal. The sheer grandeur of nature's creation held him spellbound. Each glance revealed new patterns and secrets hidden in the ice. As his gaze shifted to the top of the iceberg, a sudden movement caught Peter's attention. His heart skipped a beat. "No way," he whispered as his breath stopped. "Could it be?" he muttered, squeezing his eyes shut to get a better look. What he saw was completely unexpected, a vivid anomaly amid the desolate icy plain. Amid the serene beauty of the frozen landscape, a splash of color stood out, vibrant and alive, in stark contrast to the monochrome world around it. The discovery sent a thrill through his veins. Despite his efforts, Peter could not quite discern the details of the mysterious spectacle that had caught his attention, but he was certain something was moving purposefully across the icy landscape. After a few tense seconds, the movement vanished, slipping silently to the other side of the iceberg, leaving Peter with nothing but the cold, silent expanse of ice. He stood there with his binoculars still pressed to his eyes, a mixture of confusion and intrigue engulfing him. "What on earth could that be?" he muttered to himself, his head raging with possibilities. The idea that something or someone had been stranded there seemed implausible, given the iceberg's constant drift. He thought of reporting it but dismissed the idea, knowing he had no proof and fearing ridicule. Yet he couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't something to ignore. Determined, he decided to investigate alone. He remembered his brother-in-law's small speedboat, which he had used before. Without telling anyone, he made a plan and went to buy climbing gear, anticipating he might need to scale the iceberg. As dawn approached, Peter reached the harbor. It was quiet, wrapped in the early light. He crept along the shadows, scanning for the boat. When he finally spotted it, his breath caught. This was it. Whatever lay ahead, danger, discovery, or both, Peter was ready. Hearing no activity, he quietly climbed aboard and untied it without a sound. As the boat gently rocked free, he glanced one last time at the shore, the silhouette of his city barely visible against the morning sky. With cautious precision, he started the engine, fully aware that this journey might have serious consequences. A police boat suddenly appeared in the distance, its searchlight sweeping the waves. Peter ducked into a cove, and waited in silence until the coast was clear. Once the danger had passed, he returned to open water, steering directly toward the towering iceberg on the horizon. Something about its sheer presence called to him. He steered toward the iceberg and began preparing his gear. At the base of the iceberg, Peter looked up. The ice wall stretched skyward, shimmering and treacherous. After one last check of his equipment, he took a deep breath and began the ascent. The surface was slick and unpredictable. Each step required focus and strength. He planted his ice axe carefully and moved upward, aware that every decision mattered. The sound of cracking ice and his own breathing filled the silence. The climb grew steeper, the air colder. Nearing the top, fatigue set in. His limbs trembled, and his breath came in ragged gasps. The final stretch was the hardest. Each step demanded all he had left. The crunch of ice beneath his boots echoed through the stillness. He was almost there. What would he find? Nothing or something that would change everything? He climbed harder, faster, despite exhaustion. The summit was within reach. Just a few more steps, he told himself, pushing past the pain. At last, Peter reached the summit, greeted by a breathtaking panorama. The ocean stretched endlessly, a shimmering expanse of blue and white. Just as despair set in, something caught his eye. Faint footprints in the snow, partially erased by the wind, but undeniably fresh. His curiosity reignited. Someone or something had been here. He followed the trail, scanning every detail. Someone had survived here. Peter's pulse quickened as he spotted a crude shelter hidden in a crevice. Built with a tarp and anchored by ice axes, it was a fragile but clever refuge. He crept toward it, torn between fear and fascination. Peering inside, he saw a sleeping bag and scattered personal belongings. It was real, someone had lived here. Inside, he found a worn journal, sketches, a flashlight, knife. Then Peter noticed scientific equipment, damaged instruments, weathered notebooks, a broken Geiger counter, a telescope. Someone was conducting research, he murmured. This wasn't just survival, it was a mission. Suddenly, the sky darkened. A fierce snowstorm rolled in without warning. Peter rushed into the shelter, bracing against the howling wind. All night, the storm raged. By dawn, the storm began to subside. The silence that followed was surreal. Emerging from the shelter, Peter's resolve returned. There was more to uncover. That's when he noticed them. New footprints in the snow. He was here recently, he whispered, his pulse quickening. Peter followed the trail across the hill, weaving between towering ice formations. His heart pounded as questions flooded his mind. Peter stood silently before the station, the icy wind brushing past him. The answers were close, now buried under snow, data, and time. Whatever this person had been doing, Peter was determined to find out. Peter marveled at the weather station, rocks, soil samples, and an old camera lay carefully arranged, all part of a floating laboratory in the middle of nowhere. This wasn't just shelter, it was a workspace for science and survival. The journals and observations belonged to a man named Dr. Jensen, whose notes revealed a life dedicated to studying climate change and glacial activity. His mission was bold, lonely, and full of risk. Peter couldn't help but admire his courage and commitment. Then, through the lifting fog, a shadowy figure emerged. Peter squinted in disbelief. It was Dr. Harold Jensen himself. Weathered by the elements but still alert, he stared back in surprise at Peter's sudden appearance. After a brief pause, the two shared a moment of recognition. "Meeting someone here is the last thing I expected," Jensen said, his voice hoarse but warm. Peter told him everything, how he had spotted the iceberg, climbed it alone, and endured the storm. Dr. Jensen listened in awe, visibly moved by the young man's determination. When the fog cleared further, Jensen shared his own tale, how a sudden storm had trapped him, cutting off contact with the outside world. He had survived on dwindling supplies while continuing his research, never abandoning his mission. Recognizing the urgency of their situation, the two began pooling resources. With supplies low and the weather worsening again, they worked quickly to build a makeshift beacon using parts from Jensen's gear and Peter's climbing tools. They hoisted it high, hoping its signal would reach help before it was too late. As they waited, another storm rolled in stronger than before. The wind battered the shelter, testing its limits. Huddled together, they shielded themselves from the cold, clinging to hope. The beacon's faint glow was their only connection to the outside world. "Will they see it?" Peter asked. "They must," Jensen replied, eyes locked on the storm. Suddenly, the roar of a helicopter cut through the wind. A dark shape emerged through the snow rescue had arrived. "It's a helicopter!" Peter shouted. Jensen smiled faintly, his strength nearly gone. The chopper hovered and adjusted its path toward them, its lights flashing through the blizzard. Crew members leaned out, waving frantically. "Hurry!" one of them yelled. Peter and Jensen struggled through the snow, each step heavy with exhaustion. Reaching the aircraft, they were helped aboard, collapsing into the warmth of the cabin. Inside, Peter turned to Jensen. "Did you ever think we'd get out?" he asked. Jensen nodded slowly. "It's a miracle," he said. A crew member explained that a store owner had raised the alarm, prompting search teams to scan the area. "And then we saw your beacon," another added. Without it, Peter nodded, quietly absorbing the reality they had come dangerously close to being lost forever. "Thank you," he said to the crew, his voice full of emotion. Back in Haven, the story spread quickly. The small village became known far beyond its borders. Peter, once just another face in the crowd, was hailed as a local hero. Side by side, he and Dr. Jensen shared their remarkable tale. Whenever people gathered to hear it, Jensen would begin, "If Peter hadn't acted so fast." But Peter would gently shift the credit back, always emphasizing Jensen's resilience and brilliance. Their story became more than a survival tale. It was a celebration of courage, curiosity, and the bond formed between two strangers in the most extreme conditions. For Haven, it was a lasting symbol of what can happen when ordinary people face extraordinary moments and refuse to give up.